The chainsaw roared to life as I stood frozen in the cold morning air. The giant tree fell with a crack, crushing the earth beneath it. "This is for the betterment of the community, Renata." The mayor's voice was a calm contrast to the chaos around me. His men were already moving in, clearing my land as if it were nothing more than a patch of grass. My stomach twisted. This was supposed to be my land, my family's land. I had trusted him. Mayor Reed had promised me justice, but this was theft. He looked at me, the woman who had begged for his help months ago, and without hesitation signed the papers that allowed them to destroy everything I held dear. I hadn't cried yet, not even when the bulldozers took down the fence my father had built. I was numb. This wasn't about my grief anymore. It was about taking everything back. I was done being a victim. This was war. I wasn't someone who gave up easily. My name is Renata Dawson, and for the past 5 years, I had worked tirelessly to build something meaningful. After my parents abandoned me, I focused on stability, doing everything to ensure I never needed anyone again. When I first heard the proposal for a new community park, it sounded perfect. But it quickly became clear they weren't building a park. They were building a luxury complex that would replace everything I had. I had lived with the heartbreak of my mother's refusal to help when Sophia was sick. But this was betrayal on a larger scale. I had nothing left but my land, and now even that was slipping away. As I stood watching the destruction, I realized the mayor hadn't just stolen my land. He had stolen my last chance at closure. The time for patience was over. I had a plan. I wasn't new to the idea of fighting for what's mine. After Sophia's death, I buried myself in numbers, using my accounting skills to make sense of the chaos. Work was my escape, my refuge from the grief and the family that had betrayed me. But today, the work I did would be different. I headed to the city hall to gather the paperwork, records of every meeting, every promise Mayor Reed had made. I knew the law could work in my favor if I could just find the right evidence. I spent hours combing through city records, cross-checking financial allocations. And then it hit me. The project was funded by illegal means. There were too many discrepancies, too many shady dealings behind closed doors. This wasn't just about a fight over land. It was about exposing the corrupt foundation upon which the mayor had built his reputation. I smiled, a cold, sharp smile. The mayor had made a mistake. I wasn't just after my land anymore. I wanted everything. I gathered the evidence, documenting every false claim, every illegal transaction. Mayor Reed had used his position to manipulate the system, and now it was time to take him down. The mayor thought he could sweep me aside. He thought that the small-town girl, the one he dismissed for years, would stay quiet. But I had learned how to navigate the system. I wasn't just an accountant, I was now a force. I sent the information I gathered to the Regulatory Commission, the local press, and a few trusted attorneys. I wanted them to see the web of deceit that Mayor Reed had woven. Then I waited. The wheels of justice take time, but they always grind. The first sign of success came when my lawyer called. "Renata, you've done it. The commission is investigating Mayor Reed's office. We have enough evidence to freeze his assets." I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. While the investigation unfolded, I kept my distance from the media. I didn't need the spotlight, I needed results. I didn't tell anyone how I was planning to end this. No one needed to know. They would all find out soon enough. The more I dug into Reed's past, the more I uncovered. His connections to developers, his ties to shady business practices. It was all coming together, and soon, he would have nowhere to hide. By now, everyone in town knew something was wrong. The mayor's office was under investigation, and the tension was palpable. I continued working at my accounting job, keeping up the appearance of being just another regular employee. But inside, I was a machine. I couldn't stop. I couldn't allow myself to slow down. One night, after a particularly long shift, I opened my inbox to find an email from a confidential source. The email contained a series of internal memos that tied Reed to money laundering operations. This was it. I forwarded the information to the Regulatory Commission and the press, and then I held my breath. Everything was about to change. The first story broke in the morning newspaper. Mayor Reed under investigation for financial crimes. It wasn't just the land deal. It was everything. All of Reed's corruption, laid bare for the public to see. That morning, the calls started. First from the local press, then from people I hadn't heard from in years. I wasn't ready for the flood of attention. But I had no choice. I couldn't back down now. Every phone call felt like a new battle won. Reed was on the defensive, trying to explain his way out of the mess he had created. But I knew better. His lies were finally catching up with him. The mayor's office was raided the following week. The news was everywhere, and I watched it all unfold from the comfort of my apartment. It's happening. He's done, I whispered to myself. I had thought about this moment for years. The sweet taste of revenge was at my fingertips, but I couldn't get comfortable just yet. I needed to push forward. The press was still asking questions, digging deeper, and the investigation wasn't over. Reed would have to answer for his actions, and I was determined to make sure he did. I sat at my kitchen table, watching the news with a quiet satisfaction. But it wasn't enough yet. I needed to hit him where it hurt the most. His reputation. The media storm only intensified. News outlets from all over the state were covering the investigation. Mayor Reed was under constant scrutiny, his public image in ruins. But it wasn't just the media attention that I had wanted. It was the legal consequences. I'd spent years building a career in accounting, and now I was using every skill I had to ensure Reed paid the price. I called in favors from lawyers and financial experts, using them to tighten the legal noose around his neck. Every move I made brought him closer to the truth, and the truth would be his downfall. I watched from a distance as the mayor's life crumbled. He had no answers, no way to spin the mess he had created. The financial discrepancies I had uncovered were only the tip of the iceberg. There was more, far more. I smiled, satisfied with the progress. But there was one thing left. I wanted him to know who had done this to him. I wanted him to understand that the woman he had dismissed all those years was the one who had brought him to his knees. The first court date arrived. I stood in the back of the courtroom, a quiet observer. Mayor Reed's lawyer did everything they could to keep the case in their favor. But there was no way to argue with the evidence I had gathered. Every witness they called was met with damning testimony, and my team of attorneys was ready. This wasn't just about winning the case. It was about making sure Reed would never have the power to hurt anyone again. When the judge called for a break, I walked outside and let the cold air wash over me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had control now. Weeks went by, but the investigation was still moving forward. I could feel the tension building in the courtroom, but I knew the end was near. Reed was on his last legs. I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm now. The constant anxiety, the need to fight, it was finally over. I had done it. Reed had been caught in his lies, and now he would face the consequences. The final ruling came in. The judge found Mayor Reed guilty of corruption and misuse of office. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to breathe. It was done. The press ran the story all day, and Reed's political career was officially over. He had no allies left. I watched the news with a smile on my face. It wasn't just the land. It was everything. Reed had stolen my past, but I had taken it all back. The news hit like a bombshell. The mayor had been arrested on charges of embezzlement, and now the community was in shock. But for me, it was just the final piece of a puzzle I had carefully put together over months. I had watched him rise through the ranks of this small town, building his empire on lies, corruption, and deceit. And now it was all falling apart. But there was still something that gnawed at me. My land, the legacy my family had fought for, wasn't just about the property. It was about everything they had stolen from me. I walked into my small apartment that night, sat on the edge of my bed, and took a deep breath. It had been months of pain, of grief, but the bitterness was fading. The land was mine again. But what about the future? I wanted to feel a sense of victory, but I knew deep down that true peace wasn't about what had been taken. It was about what I was willing to build for myself now. And that was the real victory. The day the mayor was officially removed from office felt anticlimactic. The media attention was overwhelming, but inside I felt calm. I had done what I set out to do. Now, with the land reclaimed and Reed out of the picture, the hard work began. I started meeting with the developers who had once supported him, using the evidence I had gathered to ensure they stayed away from my property. But the real victory wasn't in the destruction of Reed. It was in the power I had regained. I had worked hard to reclaim what was mine. No one could take that away from me now. As I sat in a meeting with a new legal team, signing documents to officially take back my land, I couldn't help but smile. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The months that followed were filled with new beginnings. I'd always been a fighter, but now I was something else, unshakable. The whispers in town about Reed's fall from grace grew louder, but I paid them no attention. I was focused on my future. The mayor's downfall had a ripple effect. New elections were held, and the town had to rebuild. People started reaching out, offering support, but I knew they saw me as some kind of hero now. I didn't want to be anyone's hero. I didn't want pity or recognition. What mattered was that I had taken control of my own fate. Reed had promised me justice, but I had delivered it. The days of feeling powerless were behind me. Now, I could finally see a future free from the weight of the past. I met with an architect to begin the process of transforming the land. I had a vision, one that would honor my family's history while creating something new. A small community center, a place where children could come, learn, and grow. A place where I could help people make sure they didn't suffer like I did. Reed's mistake was thinking he could erase my past. What he didn't realize was that my past was the very foundation of my future. As I walked across the land, surveying the space, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. This was mine. This was our legacy. I wasn't just healing. I was building something meaningful. A few weeks later, my lawyer called me. Renata, I've just been informed that there's a new development project coming in. You need to be aware that they've bought out some of the land around yours. They're going to try to buy you out. I stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the news. It was a small town, and new developments were always on the horizon. But the way this call was framed told me something was up. I wasn't interested in selling. Not now, not ever. I'd fought for this land, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me. I immediately set up a meeting with the developers and my legal team. They didn't know it yet, but I was ready for whatever they threw at me. The meeting with the developers was intense. They came in confident, believing they had the upper hand. After all, they were a well-established company with money and connections. But I had something they didn't: leverage. I presented the contract, showing how they had been involved in illegal practices under Reed's reign, and how their dealings had been exposed. I made it clear that I wouldn't accept any offers unless they met my terms. Their faces shifted from confident to uneasy. They didn't expect a small-town woman to have the upper hand in this fight. But I wasn't small-town anymore. I was in control. They backed off, promising to respect my wishes. The deal was off and my land was safe. Another victory. The next few months were busy, but in a way that felt fulfilling. The plans for the community center started coming together. I worked with contractors, architects, and even local schools to create a place where children could have access to education, creativity, and hope. Every day felt like I was closer to something meaningful. The land was being transformed, and I was finally at peace with my choice to hold onto it. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure that the pain of the past turned into something that could help others. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could make sure that future generations would benefit from the lessons I had learned. I'd put everything I had into this project. My time, my energy, my resources. I was determined that this center would be a place where the community could thrive, no matter who they were. As I walked through the almost completed structure, I saw children playing, teachers interacting, and families gathering. It was everything I had envisioned. But there was one more thing I needed to do before I could truly let go. I needed to confront Mayor Reed, not for revenge, but to show him what his actions had created. The destruction of a life, a family, and a legacy had created something new. I had one, and it was time for him to see the consequences of his decisions. I arranged a meeting with Reed, now facing a life without his mayoral title. He had nowhere to run. "What do you want, Renata?" he asked, his voice bitter. I didn't answer right away. I just sat across from him, watching as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. You took my land, I said, finally breaking the silence. You tried to destroy everything I held dear. And now I'm showing you what happens when you mess with someone who has nothing left to lose. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before I stood up. This place, this center, is everything you stole from me. It's what could have been if you hadn't been so selfish. His face turned pale as I walked out of the room, the weight of my words settling on him. He had nothing left, and I had everything. I walked away feeling stronger than ever. My revenge had never been about hurting him. It was about healing myself. The center opened its doors on a bright Saturday morning, and the community came out in full force. It was a success, beyond anything I could have imagined. As I looked around, watching children play and families connect, I realized something. I wasn't just winning anymore. I was living. This was my legacy, and it was real. It wasn't about the land, the money, or even the revenge. It was about creating something that would live on long after I was gone. I stood at the entrance, watching the sun rise on a new chapter of my life. I had come a long way, but now I had everything I needed. I had found peace, and I had built it from the ashes of the past. As the months passed, the center continued to flourish. I hired more staff, offered scholarships to families who couldn't afford it, and made sure the kids who walked through those doors had everything they needed. I stayed away from the drama, the small town gossip, and the politics. My life was mine now. Every success felt like a silent victory. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I had done it. Mayor Reed's life had fallen apart, and my life had risen from the ashes. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Years passed, and the center continued to help children, families, and the community. It wasn't just a place. It was a symbol of what happens when someone refuses to give up. I had fought for what was mine, and I had rebuilt my life from the ground up. Sophia's memory lived on in everything I did. The pain of losing her would never go away, but I had learned to use it as fuel to push forward. I had reclaimed my life, and in the end, that was the greatest revenge of all. Nothing could take that away.